welcome back. This is Milton Shupe, and this is Gmax 1.2 for the beginning modeler, video number 19, the topic of which is Finish the Fuselage, part 2. The objective in this video is add props, spinner cutouts, canopy inner skin, the inside of the canopy, and gun ports. Okay, since the last video where we completed, didn't complete, we started the finalization process for the fuselage. My practice is to start with the fuselage, do everything you can do possibly to the fuselage before you move on to other parts. So what I hope to do today and in the next video is to finalize the fuselage before we move on to the wings. So what I did a few things since the last video. Number one, I added props and spinner cutouts and interior mesh for the canopy, added gun ports, and I don't know, seems like something else, but I guess I've forgotten what that is. No matter, I'm going to show you exactly what I did with the help of the project that I did originally in contemplating this video tutorial. So I borrowed some parts like the gun ports, and I'll show you how I did them actually and merged them in from the other project. Oh, I also cut out exhaust ports for the engine exhaust in the back of the canopy, and I'll show you how I did that. But let's start with the props and the spinners. Let's go to the rear viewport, which is the F key and the E key to zoom in. I brought in the spinners, and I brought in, or not the spinners, but I brought in the prop blades and the prop mesh. And let me just hide the mesh because not much to say about that. Let's hide the spinner that goes with it. And let's just talk about the prop blades. Let's delete these out. I'll show you how I created them using the array tool. And it's a great tool. I also used them to, after I set up this recess in the prop spinner, I did it in one of them, on the top one here, and as well as the blade. And then I simply used the array tool up here to propagate 1/4 of the spinner and the prop blade around the spinner axis. So I didn't have to do the recess 4 times, and I didn't have to build the prop blade 4 times. So it makes it a really easy process. Doing the recess was a piece of cake. I just grabbed 2 polys and extruded inward, and then grabbed the back edge and just moved it rearward. Now in doing that, because of the shape of the spinner here, that vertice that was sitting right here is now back here, so I had to grab all 4 of these once the recesses were propagated around, and use a scale tool and just roll those vertices up so they're up there at the correct height and not messing up our curvature here on the spinner. So basically grabbing 1/4 of that. Actually, I'd never done that before on a spinner, so that was kind of interesting. Of course, it worked perfectly, as you would expect, but grabbing, just as an example, I'm not going to take the time to do it here, but I've got 2, 4, 6, 7, so I grabbed all the polys all the way down, but excluding the center point here. Grabbed all these polys, deleted all these others because they didn't have the recess in it, and then used the array tool to just build me 3 more. And then once you do that, you end up with 4 parts, so you have to attach the other 3 parts to the original, select all the vertices and weld them at the joints, and then you're good to go. So that's how I did that, and because of the time it takes to select all those polys, I won't do that, but I'll show you how to use the array tool with to propagate the prop blade in place. In order to do that, of course, when you bring in a prop blade, which I borrowed from the other project, or another project, and it was kind of the incorrect length, so I had to change the length and skinny down the interior parts of it here a little bit to make it fit properly. So I've got a proper 6 foot 1 inch blade here. Our diameter across here is 12 feet 2 inches. So I've got that, and I verified it with the length with the helper tool called tape measure. You basically do that by getting in one of the proper standard viewports and finding your center point here and going up like this. And as you do this, if you look at the rollout on the right, over here on the length, 1.862, that's close. I think it was actually 1.854. Gave me the 6 feet 1 inches. And how did I know that? Of course, I used my handy dandy convert tool. 6 feet 7 inches is 72 plus 1, 73 inches gave me 1.854. And so that's what I used to size the prop down. Then, of course, you have to reset scale on anything that you scale. And that took care of the prop length. And then I wanted to ensure that let's get rid of the tape measure there. Then I wanted to ensure that my pivot was precisely where the pivot for the spinner is. So the way you do that is select the spinner and note the position of the X and Z axis. Obviously it's going to be centered, but we wanted the 334, so after you have that, then you can go to the prop blade and make sure that the pivot on it is exactly at 0 on the X axis and 334 on the Y axis. I'm sorry, the Z axis. Okay, so once I have that, I know I can propagate this around the spinner, and it should do it perfectly. If I'm a good boy and don't mess up, we'll see how it works. Let's see, we probably want to do this on the Y-axis, but we'll grab the array tool here. The way this works, basically, you tell it how many of those prop blades you want. We'll put that count right there in the 1D. Notice this has powerful tools to go in multiple directions at a time, 3D, 2D, or 1D. With incremental offsets, you can copy, use instance or reference. And let's see, if Y is the direction we want to use here, sometimes it ends up being Z, depending on what I've selected. So that's all you have to do. I want to wrap that blade around the Y-axis at 90-degree increments, 4 9s are 36, 360 degrees, and I need 4 of them, so let's see what happens. Well, it wrapped it around the Y-axis for sure, but the Y-axis is pointing up at this point, so we'll just undo that, and we'll go back and move that 90 degrees over here to the Z-axis. See if he likes us any better today. There we go. Alright, so there we have the original and 3 copies all properly rotated and positioned. Aren't we having a good time? And there you see the spinner, properly named because it's an animated object in FS 2004 and 2004 and 2002, or FS 8 and 9. And here are the 4 blades, and they also carry animation names because they are all animated to twist, to change pitch in the sim as you move your prop pitch lever. So that's how that works. And we'll get into animating such things later on. So that's what I did with that part of the fuselage project. The other thing I did was cut in the exhaust ports, and if you look carefully, you can see they come up through, they go down into the fuselage. Now I haven't cut out the fuselage yet using those holes, but essentially all I did there was hide the cutting tool here. Created two cylinders and used the scale, non-uniform scale. Of course I can't select it because I don't have the object selected and I'm not in vertice mode, but I used a non-uniform scale then to kind of elongate these. And now these aren't the actual pipes, obviously they are actually down inside, but I used this as a cutting tool, kind of the shape that is shown on the 3 view, and that worked out well. And then later, let's hide that, and then later when I created the interior mesh for the canopy, that's what shows inside here underneath. Because polys only show on one side, you wouldn't see the face that you see here. So when I clone the canopy and flip the polys, that's what you end up seeing down here, and that's the way it shows in the real world aircraft back when it existed. Alright, so, and we talked once before, I think in a previous video, about creating an interior skin for the canopy, and all I did was here was clone the canopy and then converted it to editable mesh. I guess, yeah, well, I got the exterior selected, but let's see if I can pick up there it is. Editable mesh, selected all the polys and extruded them. So, and I extruded them 3/8 of an inch, basically, about 0.0162 or something like that meters. And so I got a little thickness here around the interior walls, so to give it a little bit of a more realistic look. So that's what I did there for that. And then of course when you get done, you link that to the exterior canopy, so there's no movement, everything's tight. This needs some cleanup, as you can probably see here, which occasionally happens when you do an extrude, so you have to keep an eye out for any ragged edges and get those vertices back in place. Okay, the last thing I did was copied these cannon and gun ports from the original project and brought them over rather than just recreated them. But it's a simple, what we did here was simple. I simply created a cylinder with 4 or 5 segments in it, and then grabbed the end here and extruded out just a little bit, and then scaled it down to create this edge here, this outer lip, and then scaled it or extruded slightly more again, and then scaled it down and moved it back to create the second edge so that you get this rounded effect. And then lastly extruded the interior backwards far enough so that in the sim it isn't showing. Now in the other project I already have cannons and guns in these ports, and I've also used the Boolean technique and using I'll show you, let me just unhide my name. This is early morning, I only had 1 cup of coffee, so I'm struggling here. I think these are the, yeah. So I created these cylinders that I will use to Boolean out these little concave slots on either side, as is done with these gun ports. and that will basically finish up that part of the fuselage. So when we come back in the next video, we're going to cut in the center gear well doors here, and back here there's a larger door, which is the pilot's entry and exit system, all with ejection seat and everything else included. We're not going to get too fancy on that. We're going to create the door, and we may plop a seat in there, but that's probably as far as we'll take it for that, and that will pretty much end up finish up the fuselage work that we need to do for now, before we move on to other things. So I know I didn't do a lot of work in this one, but I just wanted to demonstrate the little things that you do to pull things together. I wanted to demonstrate the array tool. We've talked about and done Booleans for quite a while now, so I didn't see a lot of need to go through that. And creating cylinders we've done, and didn't see a lot of need to walk through that process. So I think you guys can figure that out now. So let's move on and put this particular video to bed, and we'll be back here in the next video to finish the doors and animate those doors. I'll show you how to do animation, and we'll be ready to move on to the next major components here, which are the wings. So thanks for popping in, and if you have any comments or suggestions, post them down below, and I'll respond to them. And thanks for joining in. I really hope this was helpful as a little construction that I did, but we're moving forward. Thanks, guys, and have a good day.